Street Fighter 6 came out in 2023 and quietly did something that nobody in the fighting game community fully expected. It did not just save a franchise that was struggling after a rocky previous entry, it redefined what a fighting game is even supposed to be. 3 years later, the competitive scene is still thriving, new players are still finding it for the first time, and the roster keeps growing. That combination of longevity and continued relevance is not an accident. It is the result of Capcom making a series of very deliberate decisions that the rest of the genre is still catching up to. But the story of why Street Fighter 6 works so well is more complicated than just saying Capcom got it right this time, because they had to completely rebuild trust with a player base that had been genuinely let down before. Street Fighter V launched in 2016 in an unfinished state and spent years recovering. The community remembered that. So when Street Fighter VI was announced, the reception was cautious in a way that felt earned rather than unfair. What happened next is the kind of redemption arc that makes for genuinely compelling gaming history. The foundation of everything in Street Fighter VI is the drive system. This is the central mechanic that replaced V-Gauge from the previous game, and understanding it is the key to understanding why this game feels so different to play. Every character has a drive gauge with 6 stocks. From that gauge, you can perform 5 distinct actions. Drive Impact is a powered-up attack that absorbs one hit and can break an opponent's guard. Drive Parry lets you deflect incoming attacks and, if timed on the button press rather than held, generates Drive Gauge rather than draining it. Drive Rush lets you cancel moves and dash forward with momentum to extend combos or close distance aggressively. Overdrive is the enhanced special move version that costs 2 stocks, and Drive Reversal is your defensive option out of Block Stun that costs 2 stocks and creates space. The depth that comes from managing these 5 options against an opponent who is managing the same 5 options is genuinely inexhaustible. Every single match is a resource conversation happening simultaneously with a physical one. You are not just trying to hit your opponent, you are trying to drain their gauge while protecting yours, because a player at 0 drive gauge enters burnout state, where they take increased chip damage, cannot absorb drive impact hits, and have their guard broken more easily. Burnout is genuinely dangerous, and the threat of reaching it changes how both players behave across the entire match. That layer of mental strategy exists on top of the actual moment-to-moment footsies and reactions, and it makes Street Fighter VI one of the most strategically rich fighting games ever made at any level of play. The control scheme introduced in this game is something that deserves real credit for what it did for the genre's accessibility. There are 3 control types available. Classic controls use the traditional motion input system that fighting games have used for decades. Modern controls simplify special moves to a single button direction combination, removing the execution barrier for newer players. Dynamic controls reduce the game to essentially 2 buttons for casual enjoyment. The crucial part is that these options coexist without breaking the competitive integrity of the game. Modern controls are slightly less powerful than classic in certain technical areas, which means experienced players are not disadvantaged for using classic, but new players are not locked out of having fun while they learn. That balance took real design effort, and it paid off. The roster at launch was strong and has grown significantly across 3 years of DLC. The original characters cover enough playstyle variety that any type of player can find something that fits how they naturally think about fighting games. Zangief for grapplers who want to play a patient power game. Guile for players who prefer a defensive, reactive wall of sound approach. Jamie for players who want a character that rewards commitment and grows within a single match by drinking to level up. Luke as the more accessible, aggressive rushdown option. The newcomers alongside returning characters gave the game personality that Street Fighter V took years to develop. The visual presentation is striking and distinctive. The art direction leans into bold, graffiti-inspired aesthetics with paint splatter effects during big hits, dynamic overlays during super moves, and a color palette that is confident and aggressive. In 2026, the game still looks visually interesting precisely because it committed to a specific style, rather than chasing photorealism. Games that chase realistic visuals have a shorter shelf life because they get compared to newer technology. Games that commit to a style age on their own terms, and Street Fighter 6 is going to look like itself for a long time. The sound design and music reflect the same energy as the visuals. Hit sounds are heavy and satisfying in a way that communicates impact without being cartoonish. Each character has a musical theme that reflects their personality and origin, and the music soundtrack overall has more variety and memorialism than the series has had in a long time. The voice acting for both the English and Japanese casts is strong, with characters who feel distinct and alive rather than just functional mouthpieces for move names and win quotes. World Tour Mode, the single-player component that nobody expected to be as substantial as it turned out to be. You create a custom character and travel through a large open environment that serves as the game's version of a story mode. You take on missions, fight NPCs, and train under the game's main roster characters by finding and interacting with them throughout the world. As you train under specific masters, your custom character learns their special moves and can mix abilities from multiple characters. The RPG progression underneath this is not particularly deep by RPG standards, but it is more than any previous Street Fighter game ever offered in single-player content. For players who want context, character moments, and a reason to engage with the roster outside of pure competition, World Tour delivers something genuine. The problem with World Tour, and it's worth being honest about this, is that the open world sections between fights are not particularly interesting to navigate. The environments are functional rather than memorable. The side missions are mostly variations on fighting challenges with light narrative framing. The mode is best understood as a tutorial and character exploration tool dressed in RPG clothing, and evaluated on those terms, it works well. Evaluated as a full open-world experience, it falls short of what that descriptor usually implies in 2026. Battle Hub, the game's online social space, is something genuinely novel for a fighting game. Instead of a traditional lobby or matchmaking menu, Battle Hub is a physical space where your avatar walks around an arcade environment, sits down at cabinet machines to challenge other players, watches ongoing matches on screens, and interacts with the space in ways that make online play feel social rather than transactional. In an era where online gaming has become increasingly isolated and menu-driven, the Battle Hub feels like a deliberate statement about what online spaces could be. Whether the novelty translates to sustained daily engagement varies by player, but the intention and execution behind it are clear. The online infrastructure itself is worth discussing, specifically because Street Fighter V's netcode was a genuine problem for years. Street Fighter 6 launched with rollback netcode, which is the current standard for fighting games that take online play seriously. Matches feel close to local play at reasonable connection distances. The technical foundation for online competition is solid, and that matters enormously for a game where the competitive community is a core part of the experience. Replay value in a fighting game with an active competitive scene and regular roster updates is essentially unlimited for the right type of player. 3 years in, the meta has evolved significantly from launch, with characters who were considered mid-tier finding new viability through community discovery and patch adjustments. Every new character adds interactions and matchup dynamics that ripple through the entire roster. For players who want to go deep, Street Fighter 6 has more depth than any single player could fully explore. The weaknesses are specific. The World Tour mode, while ambitious, doesn't fully deliver on its open-world presentation. Some of the DLC character pricing has drawn ongoing criticism from the community, and the game's barrier to truly high-level play, while lower than many fighting games, still requires a commitment that casual players may not want to make regardless of the modern controls option. Street Fighter 6 earns a 4.5 out of 5. The drive system alone would justify a high score, but the complete package of accessible controls, strong online infrastructure, substantial single-player content, and a competitive scene that has grown rather than shrunk over 3 years pushes it to near the top of what the genre has ever produced. The half point it loses comes from the World Tour mode not fully delivering on its ambitions and some content monetization decisions that left a sour taste. In 2026, Street Fighter 6 matters because it proved that a legacy franchise can rebuild correctly. It did not abandon what made Street Fighter iconic, it made those things more accessible without diluting them, added new ideas that genuinely expanded the game rather than replacing old ones, and launched an estate that respected the people buying it. That combination is rarer than it should be, and it deserves recognition. The fighting game genre is richer because this game exists and keeps growing. That's the simplest and most honest way to put it. If this breakdown landed for you, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want more long-form reviews where the hype is gone and the real assessment is all that matters. Share this with someone who thinks fighting games are too hard to get into, because Street Fighter 6 is genuinely the best argument against that idea. And drop a comment telling me who your main is, because that information says more about a person than most things they could tell you.